Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/slash Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, a tale of server repair from long ago. Long coded server. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. A tale of server repair from long ago. Long. If you don't want a history lesson in what a PITA it was to configure 2-node redundancy 20-some years ago, skip to paragraph 4. Today, if you want redundancy, it's easy. You build your Hyper-V/VMware/Xen server/whatever cluster, and off you go. Back in the day, it was considerably more difficult. In this instance, the year was sometime around 1999, I'd guess. My client was a very large metropolitan newspaper, and specifically the advertising department. Now, the ad designers all used Macs back then because Photoshop and Illustrator didn't run on anything else. Corporate IT, being corporate IT, didn't want anything to do with the Macs, so the advertising department contracted with my company for support. One of our other guys dealt with the Mac stuff, but I managed the servers. Now, this is before Apple brought out their short-lived Xserve line, and also before Macs really spoke TCP/IP. They wanted a server that ran on AppleTalk, and back then, the way to do that was with Novell NetWare running AppleTalk, and the Mac namespace on the volumes. So, we were running NetWare 4.11 on Compact ProLiant 4500 RS. The redundancy back then was all hardware. Essentially, we had two identical servers with local drives that had the operating systems. Then there were external storage systems with special backplane cards that allowed SCSI connections to each server. Once each server was set up to boot NetWare, they were both configured in BIOS in this redundant configuration with one server, the one plugged into port 1 on each storage system, being the primary and the other secondary. There was one other piece of hardware to make this work: a serial cable between the two servers. Once configured, the primary server would boot as normal and mount volumes from the external storage and go on its merry way. The secondary server would post, count memory, then immediately go into a loop in post where it would monitor the primary server. If it decided that the primary server was not responding, it would send a signal to every storage system connected, and a switch on each storage system backplane would operate, switching the connections to the secondary server. Once that switch was complete, the secondary server would complete post and come up looking just like the primary server. You would then repair the primary server. Unfortunately, the only way to get things back to square one with the primary servers working was to power everything off and back on. Okay, I told you all of that to tell you this. My newspaper client had this set up, and one day, the client's sysadmin calls up to say that the backup server isn't responding. When it was working properly, it would flash a message every 5 seconds or so to press F8 to switch now or something where you could manually initiate the failover. However, it was just hung up on it. I had him just restart the server, and it cleared the problem up. For a few days. When it came back, I went out to take a look and ended up doing the standard setting of dip switch 6 to clear NVRAM. That was the first thing support would tell me to do. That didn't fix the problem, as it came back a couple days later. I then called support. Did you try clearing NVRAM? And after some diags, we ended up replacing a part, maybe an array controller. That didn't fix it, so we replaced another couple parts. Of course, each attempt was separated by a few days for the server to hang up again, so eventually I just brought the server back to my office. By this time, the ticket had been elevated to the highest support group at Compaq. Over the next several days, we replaced pretty much every major part that could have been replaced and had not resolved the problem. Finally, my support guy activated the nuclear option. He sent me one of every single part that went into building the server other than the case. System board, array controllers, floppy drive, cables, power supplies, power switch, everything. He had me completely rebuild the entire server all at once from Compaq spare parts. In case you're wondering why they didn't just send a new server, this was a discontinued model that my client maintained support on. After the full rebuild, the server worked fine. I've said for many years that the worst thing that can happen when you're faced with an issue is that you never fix the problem. The second worst thing is that you fix the problem but don't know how or why. By this point, I was satisfied that it was working and we never had any similar problems. Coded server. Long time ago, the company I worked for had its nearest official tech support on the other side of the country. Since I had some knowledge of computers and had access to pretty much the entire office, they called me whenever anything needed to be done in the office. Saved them travel time, kept my job even more fun. Win-win. Server was in a room which also included several archives, across the hall from the secretaries of the engineering department. At some point, servers crashed. I get a call to check up on it. I arrive at the server room and check everything. Everything looks normal. Server restarts, everything is working. The tech support monitoring stated that server went down due to overheating, but it now runs smoothly again. Few hours later, same thing happens. Next morning, again. At this point, I'd had enough, bring over a spare airco, set it on cold and close the room. It still didn't help. Around noon, again, server overheating and shutting down. Tech guy travels all the way to the office, and we are both going step by step to figure out what the problem is. Whilst we are trying to figure out the issue, one of the secretaries comes in, surprised we still haven't got the server running again, hangs up her fur coat on the server, and heads to her desk, leaving us both staring in disbelief at what had just happened. Turned out, she had a nice new coat, and since some things had gone missing before at the desk, she had seen the server room as the best place to keep it. It was locked after all, and only a handful of people had access to it cause of the archives. There were a few hooks on top of the server, and she found those perfect as a coat hanger, not realizing it blocked airflow to the fans keeping the server cooled. When the server went down, she couldn't do her regular work, so she would get her coat and go for a walk coming back after everything was running again. Access to the server room was after that further restricted, with only the office manager and me having access to the room. Everyone else had to contact us if they needed to enter that room for the archives. I still wonder why no one ever moved those archives to a different room.